I'll be talking about wellness. Now, I'm a neurologist, so I grew up learning about the brain, about disease, about neurons, about symptoms, medicine, surgery. How did I get started on this whole journey of wellness? Because we don't learn wellness in medical school, although that's changing. We learn disease. I learned it from you, so let me tell you two stories. Early in my career, I remember seeing a person with Parkinson's disease about in her early 80s. She said to me, "I've had Parkinson's disease for 25 years. Scratched my head. "Oh, I don't think so. Tell me about that. Tell me about your symptoms." And she described her symptoms, and I said, "You're right. You're doing so well. You've had Parkinson's for 25 years. So I said, "Tell me about that." And it went something like this. So she got down on the floor, and she's doing downward facing dog, and I have my clipboard, and I'm like this, I couldn't even look her in the eyes because she was so much more flexible than myself. She said, "I do yoga." I said, "Ah, okay, that's your secret, you do yoga." And she said, "No, no, no." She said, "I do yoga, and I run classes in downtown Seattle for people living with cancer and AIDS." Ah, that's your secret. And then many years later, I went into a room, saw a gentleman for the first time with advanced Parkinson's movement symptoms. He's in a wheelchair. We talked a bit. "How are you doing? How is life with Parkinson's?" His answer was, "I'm doing well." Maybe he didn't say it that loudly. He had soft voice, difficulty speaking, but "I'm doing well." I was taken aback again, and I said, "Well, what do you mean? What do you mean you're doing well?" He said, "Right here today, there's my wife, my child, my kids. 20 years ago, they wouldn't be here with me. And Parkinson's gave me the opportunity to take a step back and make some priority shifts in my life so that I can bring forth what's really very important." And that's what I think wellness is all about, and that's what I'd like to discuss with you here today. So I did a little experiment once. I asked all of my patients for that day, "What does wellness mean to you?" Because, of course, if I were to ask everybody in this room, it would be probably a different answer. So just give me a word, a theme, a concept. What does wellness mean to you? And this is what I got back. Sense of independence, self-worth, and self-pride. Freedom of movement and pain. Strength, power, inner strength, inner power they were actually referring to. Control, and hope. Happiness, peace, balance, issues related to simplicity, simple things in life, still being able to make a contribution or a connection to what's important, meaning in life, and to be strong and to be able to adapt and go with the flow. If you look at these things, you look at these comments, how much had to do with the movement symptoms of living with Parkinson's? Very little. And this is what wellness meant to these group of about 20 or so people. So I like to talk about where medicines leave off. Medicines are a very important part of your treatment. Surgery is a very important potential part of your treatment. But there's this rounded, well-balanced part of your treatment that we need to talk about as well. And when I talk about wellness, I also like to introduce my concept or idea as a wellness physician. What are the different components of wellness? What is wellness medicine? What is living better? It's taking a holistic approach. And that holistic approach certainly involves treating the disease, managing the symptoms, optimizing your health care, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. Issues related to lifestyle, which you've already heard about, but also self-care. And then extending that care to your care partner or community. And it just so happens that many of these facets not only contribute to better living, but also contribute to that whole concept of neuroplasticity and better brain function, which is so very important to all of us. Now, I'd like to spend a few words talking about optimizing your health care. You already heard today, and you already know, that Parkinson's disease is a lifelong condition. And the treatment is very personalized. What works for one person is not the same as what works for another person, perhaps. It can get complicated over time. It can change over time. And it takes a whole team, a whole healthcare team and a personal team to care for Parkinson's disease. The way to get the best out of your care is to be involved in your care. And that's a really very important thing. Now, I'm going to introduce, and many of you already know this, Every Victory Counts, Essential Information and Inspiration for a Lifetime of Wellness with Parkinson's Disease, which I co-authored with my colleague Sierra Ferris, as well as partnered with the Davis Phinney to put this on. And this book is really a care management tool. It's a guide, it's a partner to help you enhance your care, be engaged in your care, organize your care, and really optimize, partner with your healthcare team. I won't say very much about the treatment of Parkinson's disease from a medical, surgical, from a traditional point of view, but I do want to mention that treating Parkinson's disease does indeed take a team, and that team might include rehabilitation specialists, physical therapy, occupational therapy, your speech and swallowing pathologist, or people from the community, like healing arts specialists. Know who's available to you and engage them, get them involved in your care earlier rather than later so you can be proactive and help prevent or delay complications rather than reactive, and that is trying to put out fires after they occur. When I talk about optimizing your care, it's prioritizing and personalizing your care to you. Now, let me show you one example, and this particular example is from a worksheet in the Every Victory Counts manual. Now, you don't have to read the words on this worksheet, but what it is a list of problems or symptoms that someone might be experiencing. And they're asked to circle whether it's a problem, a 0, if it's no problem, or a 5 on the right-hand side if it's a significant or serious problem. Now, I can go into that room as a physician, and I might see the person shaking or have tremor, and I might right away target on that tremor, target on that movement symptom as a problem. But as I look at this worksheet, I see, well, it's not just problems with movement. This person also is saying, my sleep is not so good, and anxiety is a significant problem. Well, we all know what happens when you get anxious and your tremor gets worse, and your tremor gets worse and you get anxious. It's that snowball effect. It's a way to get a nice snapshot of you and how you're feeling, and not just pigeonholing the treatment in one particular area. It's so important to have a more holistic approach. Now, let's go back to this living better through this holistic self-care. I talked a little bit about optimizing healthcare, talked a little bit about treating disease. Now I'd like to talk about what you can do to live better. So here's my question. As a neurologist, as I already mentioned, I learned from you about what it means to be well and the sense of balance, not just movement, that is so important to be well. So then I also asked the question, what does it mean about brain function? Does living well make a difference in how the brain functions? What's the answer? I can't hear you. Yes. Say it like you really mean it and believe it. Yes. The answer is yes. Turns out our brains are inherently smart. It knows what's good for us, and it makes changes that reflect the things that are important to good living and improves brain function based on that. The whole concept of neuroplasticity, and that our brains are not hardwired, but actually change as a result of experience and behavior. Enhance connection between nerve cells, enhance how nerve pathways are activated. But remember, this concept of neuroplasticity is a result of our experiences in life. And neuroplasticity can be both positive, we tend to talk about the positive, but also can be negative. And our job is to enhance that balance so that we can move in the positive direction. And I like to really bring in this concept of mind, body, and spirit because I think that's what it entails. Just focusing on the one, just focusing on the body, just focusing on the movement doesn't engage the whole brain the way it should. It doesn't engage some of the positive factors that are so important to us. So I break this up into lifestyle and healing lifestyle. Now, I'll just mention a few words on nutrition. You already heard about nutrition from Dr. Henchcliffe this morning. She mentioned Mediterranean diet as a diet that may be very helpful and favorable for brain health. It's being studied in people at risk for Parkinson's disease and Parkinson's disease itself, Alzheimer's dementia, good old-fashioned getting older. And the Mediterranean diet is high in antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. Now, there's also a lot of research looking at brain vascular health. What keeps our brains healthy and strong from a vascular point of view? And that research mostly is drawn from stroke and heart disease. So it turns out our brain does respond to healthy nutrition. Now, what is the Mediterranean diet? It's probably easier for me to answer that question by saying what it is not. And I think you all know what it is not the typical Western American diet. What color is the Western American diet if you can throw out one color? White, brown, beige. I heard a couple of answers. Pretty bland, right? That pretty much sums it up. Maybe you got potatoes, French fries, white bread, cookies, pastries. Maybe you can throw in some artificial color and it won't be so white. But that's the average American diet. Now, if you could look at your diet and maybe do one thing to enhance the antioxidant potential of your diet, add color. How do you add color? You add color by increasing vegetables and fruits and maybe even some helpful spices. And that may be healthy for brain function and brain aging. Now, somebody once, when I gave this presentation, said, well, you have to be careful about what kind of color you add. And he reminded me of artificial color. He said, a plate or a bowl of Fruit Loops does not count, okay? So a bowl of Fruit Loops does not do it. But go home today, tomorrow, add a piece of color, vegetable or fruit. And I say vegetable before fruit because most of us do really good in our fruit, but not so good in our vegetable. And how many servings of fruits and vegetables are we supposed to get a day? I heard 5, 8 to 9. How many of you do that? I don't even think I can raise my hand, although I try. So a couple. So even just adding one a day, one extra a day. For some of you, it might just be your only that day. Makes a difference. I'll talk briefly on exercise for brain health because you already heard the wonderful presentation about Dr. Ford. But let me walk you through some of the pictures up here. Look in the left upper hand corner. That's a picture of an MRI, conglomerate of MRI from multiple people. And the areas of blue and yellow are areas of the brain that showed increased size. These are older people who were put through 2 different kinds of exercise programs. Now, this result really blew me away because not only can we enhance brain function, we're enhancing the size of our brains with exercise. Very, very important information. Now, look in the lower left-hand column, or lower left-hand portion of the slide, and that's a functional MRI a way that you can measure brain activity in a cycling research study. And what this study showed was that brain activity with cycling looked similar to the brain activity with the Parkinson's medicine, and better than when you looked at the brains without medicine. Now, in the right-hand upper corner, you see another study which was fascinating to me, and it was people who had damage. They had some kind of injury to their arm, and because of that, they couldn't use their arm. Their arm was immobilized. And they were able to image the brains in people before, when this just happened, and then 2 weeks later. And what they found through this imaging technique, a special way that you can look at brain fibers that actually channel down the brain into the spinal cord, so these are fibers associated with movement, they saw a loss of that functional activity after just 2 weeks by not moving that side. Very important stuff. It's kind of a backwards way of looking at, but shows that the more we use, the better we get. And then finally, the picture in the middle has crosshairs over an area of the brain called the hippocampus. You heard from Dr. Traster this morning about memory. The hippocampus is one of the areas in the brain, seat of memory. And exercise enhances the activity and size of the hippocampus. More about that in a minute. Know you. What do I mean by that? Well, first know your disease, your symptoms, and how that might impact what you do and how you do it. Do you have apathy or lack of motivation, depression, anxiety, pain from arthritis, pain from dystonia, muscle pain? Does your blood pressure fluctuate? Even do you have heart disease or diabetes? All these things are going to be important to discuss, I would say, with a physical therapist. Get started on the right track with an exercise program, but don't just talk about what you're going to do. Talk about how these things might impact your ability to do it. Are you a natural athlete, or did you not exercise all your life? Of course, that's going to make a difference if you're going to just start today. And who can you exercise with? How do you get motivated? What will support you through to success? We tend to spend a lot of time talking about what you should do and not enough time talking about how you're going to do it and how you're going to be successful. A lot about the barriers and removing the barriers that Dr. Ford talked about. So I would suggest that this should be part of your conversation with your doctor, with your nurse, with your physical therapist, with your family, whatever it may be. Now, I also caution about reductionism. There's a lot of reductionism in Parkinson's and a lot of reductionism when it comes to what should I do let's just take exercise, for example. What exercise should I do? I heard I have to get on a bike. I heard I need to do tango. I heard it's got to be Tai Chi is the latest one, right? And if I'm not doing Tai Chi, I'm not doing the right thing. Think about, for instance, tango. Very helpful for balance. Research supports this. It's physical. It is aerobic. It's musical. We are wired to move. It's creative. It's social. It's new. Many people don't tango. That's not the kind of music moves that they've been taught. It's very engaging. It's fun. It's social. It's emotional. And it's very personal, and that brings touch. I saw a couple dancing over there in the corner, which I really liked when Dr. Ford was doing that round the room, because we can't forget about the power of touch. Now, all of these things are related to why, I believe, tango has positive results. It's not just the movement. And that goes back to my whole prescription for wellness, encompassing that balance of mind, body, and spirit. So let's talk a little about mind, mood, behavior. So depression, anxiety, thinking functions can all be a part of Parkinson's disease, also life in general. Here's some interesting studies that you might or might not be aware of. The picture in the middle, remember that scan from exercise? And I talked about how exercise improves or increases the size of the hippocampus, the memory-enhancing area of the brain. Exercise has been shown not just to affect that area of the brain, but to improve that executive function, the thinking problems associated with Parkinson's disease. And when they study this area of the brain, they also show enhanced growth factors, those factors that bathe the nerve cells to enhance their activity and promote their life and reduce degeneration and cell death, perhaps. Exercise can go one step further and improve mood, improve depression, and that improvement in depression is associated with changes in this area as well. Now, let me talk about the two pictures at the top. And remember my patient with yoga? And that was one of her answers to her success in living with Parkinson's disease. But one of the benefits of yoga and Tai Chi is how they incorporate the mind into movement. Just like yoga therapy incorporated the emotions and laughter into the movement. Engages much more areas of the brain, but incorporates and enhances how the mind deals with, and also that mind-body connection, so how the body moves. And let's not forget the picture in the top in the middle there. Support is so very important to doing well with Parkinson's disease, doing well with any condition. As a matter of fact, it's probably the one factor across all conditions, whether you're talking about a brain condition or heart disease or cancer, that has the universal benefit of increasing or enhancing outcome, reducing death, for instance, from a condition like cancer, or maybe even Parkinson's hasn't been studied yet. So having someone to talk to share with, that you trust, so critically important. Now, of course, we have medications that can be very helpful for mood, medications that can be helpful for thinking. I already talked about the power of exercise, both for cognitive function, our executive, higher order thinking functions, but also depression, anxiety, especially yoga, qigong, and aerobic exercise. There is some evidence, research evidence, that these exercises improve mood. Diet. You heard about the healthy diet that is associated with a reduced risk of developing Parkinson's disease. Well, diet is being studied in depression, for instance, and the Mediterranean diet and a prudent non-Western diet is also showing some value in depression. Now, we can talk about treatment of thinking functions. We can talk about treatment of mood, but we can also talk about enhancing our reserve or resiliency. Very, very important when we're talking about Parkinson's disease and living well with Parkinson's disease. How do we enhance our sense of resiliency? If we have the symptoms and we have the problem, our goal is to reduce the problem, reduce the symptoms. But in the moment, how do we manage with those symptoms? And there's many ways to do this. One is the positive experiences like laughter yoga. One is connection and spirituality, and that connection could even be connection to nature itself. There's an interesting study looking at people with depression, and this study looked at the effect of exercise. This group went to the mall and walked every morning. This group went out into the park and walked. Which group did better when it came to treating the depression? You know the answer. The walk in the park. Remember that slide about reductionism? Walking in the park brings so much. It brings your connection with nature. It brings learning how to navigate this new pathway, or what's around the next corner, the excitement perhaps, or maybe it's the person you're walking with, and so on and so forth. So very important. The sense of community is important when it comes to enhancing resiliency, and I'll talk about how that is a two-way street. And finally, self-care, mindfulness of the moment, and learning how to respond and not just react. Community as medicine, what I'd like to talk about is the two-way street. So remember when You go to a support group, you get support. But what else do? You give support. And there's evidence to suggest that giving support or volunteering or whatever it may be actually enhances life satisfaction, life quality. So it's not just a one-way street. And even for care partnering, remember, your caregiver, your care partner is giving support, but don't forget to mirror that support back. Now, a few words about healing and resiliency for brain health. Neuroplasticity is associated with learning and experience. So let me tell you a secret about brain activity. Our brains are wired for negativity, and it's our job to offset that. Think about, for instance, the Yets. When you were first diagnosed with Parkinson's, where did your mind go? Your mind went maybe perhaps to the worst case scenario 10 years down the road. Or when you're asked, are you experiencing this symptom? Your mind is saying, no, not yet, because you already have it in your mind that that's where it's going to be. So rechanging our own internal language and dialogue is really very important. And there are many ways you can do this, and mindfulness is one way. And mindfulness is a way that you can be there in the moment, pay attention to the moment, without reacting or judging to it so quickly. It's a way of understanding and really changing your relationship to your disease. If you're sitting with tremor, you can react to that tremor about how terrible and how bad it may be, or you may be able to shift your thoughts and ideas to the response of, this is one moment with tremor, the next moment might be better. And there are multiple ways we can bring mindfulness into our life, and that's just some of them. So I'm talking a little bit about changing the forecast. You don't need to go down this road. You can veer off a little bit. And I'll close with this picture. Does anybody know what that white fluff is? Of course you do. It's a cloud, right? It's not a trick question. What kind of cloud is that? It's a lenticular cloud. So this is my experience from 2 years ago. I was on my favorite mountain in the world, Mount Rainier in Seattle. And we were up there. It's going to be my first night overnight on Mount Rainier. I was taking a class which shows an old dog can, what's that saying? An old dog can learn new tricks. And so I thought this was the most beautiful cloud in the world. It's the most beautiful. Oh my gosh, I took a picture. I'd never seen such a thing. I was overwhelmed in the moment with that beauty. Very important. It's important to see what you have around you now. But then somebody who was more trained than me said, oh, Monique, that's not a good cloud. That signals danger tomorrow. There's a storm on that mountain, and that storm's going to brew, and it's going to be bad tomorrow. So it's important to see that cloud for the beauty it is, but then also understand, okay, I need to be prepared. So what do I need to do to prevent, to keep myself out of harm's way, to do better? And that's this whole concept of living better and living well. What can I do to change the trajectory of my course, whether it be neuroplasticity, positive living, a new outlook, how I respond to my symptoms, how I respond to my care partner or community.